This week, I want to talk about a really cool opportunity that I had recently, which was to run a D&D game for a bachelor party. A former colleague of mine reached out and said, "Hey, we watch your videos and we've seen some of your streaming stuff, and we were hoping that you might be able to help us out with a bachelor party." What they wanted me to do was to put together a game for them that would run about 3 to 4 hours long and was really customized specifically to the groom and to the group that they all play with. Hey, if you're new to the channel, my name is Ryan, and we make geeky videos that we put out every week. It was a really fun challenge, and so I want to talk about the way that I went about doing that, what I included and why, and hopefully if this sounds like a lot of fun to you, either for a birthday party or a bachelor party or what have you, you can use some of these ideas. And if this sounds like a lot of fun and you'd like to do it, but it also sounds like a lot of work, because it kind of was, then you can check out our store where this entire module is up for sale and you can just plug in your own things. The first thing that I started off talking about was logistics. How many players were there going to be? How long was it going to run? And what was the location? Something that I thought was really fun about this is that it was being combined with a pub crawl. There were 3 different breweries that we were going to be at. And so from there, I started to structure the day sort of like a 3-act play. Each brewery was going to have its own unique feel and challenge to it. The first place that we were at, I structured very much like a festival session that you might have for one of your campaigns. There was a drinking contest, a pie eating contest, and a knife throwing contest. Now, for all of this, I really leaned into the silliness of it. I made a bunch of custom one-page character sheets that had a bunch of legally distinct names like Boren Oakenschold and Barrygorn, and there were a bunch of other really funny sounding D&D and Tolkien names in there. Everybody only had 4 stats, and everyone had a special ability that they could use. I also came up with a bunch of goofy little items that would allow people to steal a success or do a re-roll or roll with advantage. And then lastly, I bought a giant plush D20, and that's what it is that we rolled. In that first location, the idea was that everybody would have a different set of challenges that they would try to do, and they were competing against each other. The group dynamic was such that with the 3 or 4 different games we had, everyone was able to play in a heads-up game. And the idea was, well, there were 2 competitors, everybody was still around cheering them on, so they could say things, do things, use their items to give advantage or disadvantage, and all of this was, of course, happening at an actual brewery, which was fun, and there were people that were walking by and asking what was going on, and a couple of other geeks and gamers that said, "Oh, well, I would do this," and so I decided to give somebody advantage because the crowd was cheering them on. It was very fun and very silly. The idea at that was that at the end of the festival day, this first brewery, all of the characters sort of passed out, and when they woke up, the wedding ring was missing, and so they were on a quest to find the one ring that they needed for the day. Logistically, we then sort of packed up from that first brewery and went to a second location. The second location was styled to be a bunch of puzzles and traps. That was the challenge. That's what made it different from the first place. So the way that we really started off with that one that I felt pretty good about was a little bit of trivia. I took some geeky trivia questions and sort of styled it in a way of like, okay, well, if I read this statement, who can figure out what's wrong with the statement, or who can answer straight up trivia questions, no phones, nothing like that. That was a lot of fun. This was a group that does bar trivia together, and so that was something that I wanted to incorporate. In the preliminaries of talking about what the day was going to be like, I made sure to ask a bunch of questions about the groom, about the bride, and about the group that gamed together. I wanted to make sure that the day was really customized to their hobbies, their likes, their interests, and especially, of course, for the groom's, since it was his party. After going through all of the trivia, I simply gave the group a riddle. It was a fairly common riddle that you'll see some places. The idea of like, okay, well, you have a wolf, a goat, and a head of cabbage, and you come to a river and you have to get across it. You can only take one thing with you at a time. Nobody can leave. You can't go around the river. And it was a really fun and goofy day. Like at one point they said, okay, well, we're just going to walk down the river for a little while and see if we can find a different place to cross. And I said, magically, you walk down the river for a little while, and up ahead you see the exact same boat and goat and wolf and head of cabbage. There's some mystical spell that's keeping you from leaving this place. That's super railroady, and in a normal campaign or one shot, I could see people getting a little miffed at that, but everyone took this in stride. We knew that it was meant to be a big goofy day, and so they just ran with that. That section actually went pretty quickly, which is fine. I had an extra bit of trivia and game in my back pocket, but because of the timing, I knew I could leave stuff out or add it if I needed to. Turns out in the second place, I didn't. The last thing that we did for the puzzles and traps was they found a dwarven lockbox, and the groom had a memory of that lockbox from last night and that it was super important. And so, of course, he got the idea that they must have traveled here somehow and put the ring in the lockbox. Maybe that's where it was. In order to pick the lock, they had to play Jenga, right? Or whatever game you want to call it. They played Jenga. Now, to make the game a little bit more fun, what they would do is they would roll a die to determine how many different of the little Jenga pieces that they had to use. Also, for the groom, it was extra fun because we had a foam sword and shield that were taped to his hands, and a big goofy Viking helmet that he had to wear that made it hard to see. And he was doing all of this while trying to play Jenga. Every time they stacked up, I think it was 6 layers, that was one of the tumblers that was done. If it fell over, that counted as a failure. It was really sort of just loose and used to fill up that time that we had, but everybody was having a really good time, and people would go through and do things to mess with each other, to try to mess it up or help them out, or all kinds of sorts of things. It was a really great time. A big thanks to all of our patrons, and especially to Arvi. Joining our patron is the most direct way to be a part of our community and to help us to continue to make content for you. Plus, you get access to things like early videos as well as monthly maps. So head over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out being a patron. All right, now back to the video. And the third location was our combat. Between each location, when they would sort of get to the end of it, they would find a clue that led them to the next place. I had gone and found coasters and bar naps and things like that for the next real life brewery, and that's what led the party to the next place. It was just a little bit of extra fun in order to tie together what we were doing in real life and what was going on with our characters. Combat at the third place was super silly. It was the idea of a fighting ring, and they had to fight in groups. It was a group of 6 people, so it was 3 versus 3, and they would narrate and describe what it is that they were doing, and then we would just roll the big plush D20, and they would use one of their 4 stats in order to add to that. I think that their 4 stats were thinky, rawr, how you doing, and bendy. So they would describe it and then add that to their D20 roll. Once all of that happened, it was, of course, just the groom in a one-on-one fight, and the fight was with the arena master, and we had gotten a giant cardboard cutout of the mother-in-law. everybody was on board with it. It wasn't trying to be derisive or mean or anything like that. Apparently, when they told the mother-in-law that's what they were doing, she thought it was absolutely hilarious because she's there for a lot of their board game days. I think any of that kind of stuff is fine as long as everybody's in it and you're not punching down, you're punching up or punching across. The day was so much fun. It was a great way to sort of celebrate this group and to celebrate the upcoming nuptials and to just have a lot of goofy fun. This is something that you could easily adapt for a birthday party or a graduation or really just a day that the group wants to get together. I think that it was extra successful because I was there. And what I mean by that is there was an outside person that was running it. So the entire group, including their forever DM, got to be a part of the fun. So that's just something to consider. Have you ever done any custom one-shot games or run a game for a bachelor party, bachelorette party, birthdays, graduations, corporate training, any of that kind of stuff? I'd love to hear how you incorporated D&D to that extra fun special day. I hope you liked this. It was a lot of fun to put together, and I really enjoyed sharing it with you. Until next time, I'm Ryan. This is Roll for Initiative. Bye.